Thank you.
And going back to our main story today, the diplomatic angle of this war, joining me now to break down all the latest of the ICJ ruling in The Hague is Brooke Goldstein, Executive Director of the Lawfare Project and the author of End Jew Hatred, a Manual for Mobilization. Thank you for joining me. Obviously, the responses have already come out quick and pretty firm. The first response I want the audience to take a listen to is the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who had this to say following the ruling this Friday.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas, a genocidal terror organization. On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated the most horrific atrocities against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and it vows to repeat these atrocities again and again and again. Our war is against Hamas terrorists, not against Palestinian civilians. We will continue to facilitate humanitarian assistance and to do our utmost to keep civilians out of harm's way, even as Hamas uses civilians as human shields. We will continue to do what is necessary to defend our country and defend our people.
And Brooke, as I'm speaking to you, red alert sirens warning of incoming rockets are going off in the south of the country at the moment. But with regards to this ICJ ruling today, earlier in the court on Friday in The Hague, the provisional order is being viewed as a harsh diplomatic blow for Israel, but it still appears slightly unclear as to who exactly is the real winner and loser of these provisions.
Well, look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that Israel made a monumental strategic mistake deciding to appear before this kangaroo court in what is really lawfare theatrics. I don't think Israel won today at all. I think the spin is false. I want to be very clear, however, there was no determination by the court whether or not genocide was committed by Israel. Obviously, it has not been. The court just issued this preliminary order telling Israel not to commit genocide, which I think is completely asinine. Obviously, the court did not even mention the word Hamas. It did not make any order of Hamas to stop targeting Israeli civilians. It did not tell Hamas to stop using its own civilians as human shields. It made no mention of the stealing of humanitarian aid. It was a completely one-sided order. And I want to be very clear about something. Palestinian civilians deserve to have their right to life protected. But it is not Israel that is endangering those civilians. It is Hamas, but it is also the international community that is refusing to allow the Gazan civilians to exit Gaza. In any other type of crisis, there are refugees that can be relocated for humanitarian purposes. But the world wants these civilians to die. That is very clear. They have boxed them in, they have bottled them in, and they were refusing to allow them to leave, therefore playing into the Hamas strategy of using them as human shields so that lawfare can continue during the operations to delegitimize Israel and make it more likely that the IDF soldiers will be putting themselves unnecessarily in harm's way, and that obviously Israeli civilians will continue to be targeted.
As you so rightly pointed out, the ICJ case basically only started after October 7th, meaning they've completely left out part of the story as to where the original genocide of murdering more than 1,200 people actually began and exactly by who. You now have, apart from South Africa and the Palestinian Authority and even Iran, a terrorist state, congratulating the decision that practically isolates Israel, but Hamas A terror organization is coming out and saying that what the ICJ is doing proves once and for all that Israel is committing genocide and should be held to some kind of punitive measure, and that no state is above the law. Surely as a world body, there is some kind of embarrassment that a terror organization is standing on the same side as your ruling?
Correct. And it's also embarrassing that South Africa, a country that itself has no impartial judicial system, is the one that is serving as, the plaintiff in this case. I really don't understand the purpose of why Israel is even participating in this, other than perhaps maybe for Tal Becker to have his 5 minutes of fame, which came and gone. And frankly, he didn't even do such a good job. And let's not also forget that the court is an arm of the United Nations. The United Nations itself, through its agencies like UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency itself, has been shown time and time again not only to violate the rights of Palestinians, but to actively participate and aid and abet Hamas, a terrorist group. UNRWA, for example, runs schools in Gaza, where it hires teachers off the Hamas payroll. It has invited Al-Qutla al-Islamiyah, which is Hamas's youth wing, into the schools to recruit Palestinian children for armed activities. So Israel should have not participated in this. It is absolute theatrics, and it is a disgrace to the international legal system, if it even exists anymore.
And speaking of possible theatrics, just in the last minute that we have, Brooke, I'm curious, what do you think or make of the announcement that came out just a few hours after the ruling that El Al, Israel's national airline carrier, is now going to stop flights to South Africa following the ICJ case? It may be unsafe for Israelis to travel there right now, but what about the incredibly strong and vibrant Jewish community that's there? Are they going to be left unprotected?
I'm very concerned about the Jewish community in South Africa. I personally have a lot of friends who are South African. Some of them have made Aliyah to Israel and have left their families behind. Also note recently the decision of the South African government to say that they will prosecute and potentially throw in jail anyone who has served in the IDF. South Africa is becoming a very scary place. Right. In fact, the world itself is becoming a scary place as long as we facilitate the narrative of terrorist groups to justify the killing of civilians. This will continue.
Brooke Goldstein, Executive Director of the Lawfare Project and the author of End Jew Hatred, a Manual for Mobilization. Thank you so much for your time and your analysis this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
That brings us to the end of this breaking news edition, but stay tuned. We'll have more updates at the top of the hour on day 112 of the war.